The sin of sloth. Sloth, the characteristic sin of our age, is the most difficult to define and label a sin. Our modern conception of the idea is often associated with laziness and used to describe those with an allergy to hard work. But sloth isn't the opposite of industry. It's the opposite of enthusiasm. It is an indifference toward the true, good, and beautiful. Thus, someone stuck in a cycle of endless activity is equally as guilty of the sin of sloth as the one who does nothing but sleep. The word sloth is a translation of the Greek akidia and the Latin acedia, meaning without care or in an inert state. In the Iliad, the ancient Greek Homer uses the term to describe 1. Soldiers heedless of a comrade, and 2. The neglected body of Hector. By the early 5th century and on through the Middle Ages, the term became a technical one in Christianity, referring to a failure to love God with adequate fervor, allowing oneself to drift into a sort of indifference towards spiritual pursuits. Sloth is a sluggishness of the mind, which neglects to begin good. It destroys the spiritual life on account of the fleshly utterly prevailing over the spirit. Thomas Aquinas. When we meet Dante, the pilgrim, in the Inferno, there is a case to be made that sloth of this type was not only a punishable sin in Purgatory, but also Dante's chief sin in his own life. In the opening lines of the Inferno, we find Dante, who had wandered from the straight and true path. He had fallen asleep at the wheel of his soul and lost track of where he was headed. By the time he arrives in the deepest pit of hell and is told to behold this, we learn this entire journey is about pilgrim remembering to hold his soul at attention. When we finally meet the slothful in Canto 18 of Purgatory, Dante has received several corrections from Virgil and one from Cato, who noticed Dante's tendency to delay longer than he ought. In this way, Dante is like the folk on Purgatory's fourth terrace, whom, quote, the fiery sting of love makes up for their omission and delaying when perhaps they were tepid in good works. These are the first two types of sloth Dante introduces to us: those who never started and neglected good works entirely, and those who delayed their pursuit of the good. At the end of Canto 18, we find a third category of the slothful: those who abandon a good work before it is finished, those impatient in their pursuit of the good. In this category, Dante gives us two examples. Quote, and he who was my help in every need said, turn this way and see the two who come, giving acedia the bite of blame. Behind the rest they called, none were alive of all for whom the Red Sea parted. When at last the Jordan saw his heirs arrive, and those two could not bear the toil and strife with the son of Anchises to the end, and gave themselves up to an inglorious life. End quote. The besetting sin of our age. When I say that ours is an age of sloth, it is this neglect or disloyalty to the spirit, an indifference toward the things that truly matter that I am gesturing at. And by saying ours, I am for the most part referring to those who live in the United States, where the economic machines of late-stage capitalism constantly tried to suck individuals into the barrenness of a busy life, or should I say slothful life. Quote, if the besetting sin of modernity is pride, an inordinate confidence in know-it-all reason, then that of postmodernity is sloth, a despairing indifference to truth. Someone who believes in nothing and lives for nothing might as well be asleep. Sloth is the ultimate sin of omission. Sloth sits still, unmoved by anything real. The sad truth is that many of us are, at best, only half awake. We think we're engaged in the real world, the world of stock markets, stock car racing, and stockpiles of chemical weapons. But in fact, we're living in what Lewis calls the Shadowlands. We think we're awake, but we're really only daydreaming. We're sleepwalking our way through life, asleep at the wheel of existence, only semi-conscious of the eternal. Those things that are truly solid, that bear the weight of glory. Kevin Van Hooser. For those familiar with the work of Joseph Piper, this conjures a recollection of his lament for the loss of true leisure in a capitalistic society. True leisure is not the laziness that most modern Western folk believe it to be. It is a freedom from what you do for money, which makes rooms for the pursuit of higher spiritual goods. True leisure is what makes space for magnanimity. But today's Western culture is motivated predominantly not by movements of the heart and soul, but by how much it can get done in a day. This is why sloth is the besetting sin of our age. 4 years ago, it was undoubtedly my chief sin. At that time, I was an associate at a large law firm in Minneapolis working in private equity mergers and acquisitions. I answered emails and pushed paper for upwards of 12 hours a day. I had little time for anything except work. Nothing would say I was lazy, but the sin of sloth most certainly had a hold on me. Perhaps you too recognize some sloth in you and now find yourself asking what to do about it. In Dante's Purgatory, the cure prescribed to souls who suffered from sloth in life is to race around the terrace, shouting famous examples of their vice, sloth, and its opposite virtue, zeal. We see them, quote, a rage of dust, swinging their paces like a scythe, galloping for goodwill and righteous love, shouting, quote, Mary ran to the hill country in haste, to conquer Lerida, Caesar slashed Marseille, then ran to bend the enemy's neck in Spain. Come on, don't let time slip away for lukewarm love, cried those who ran nearby. Zeal and well-doing makes grace green again. Now, I don't think we need to dash about and shout ancient examples of sloth and zeal to heal ourselves of sloth, yet what the souls in purgatory do outwardly, we can do inwardly. We can shift our orientation toward the spirit through reflection and attention. Many of us have convinced ourselves that we are not guilty of sloth because we are not lazy. But are we properly oriented toward and attending to the things that matter? Or are we spending our lives distracted by meaningless things? Are we sleepwalking through life, or can we genuinely say that we are giving the best of our time, attention, and energy to the things that are highest? If not, it might be time to make a change. It doesn't need to be a big one, like leaving your job or your city. It just needs to be one that takes back energy from meaningless things that steal it. Maybe it's writing, reading, or journaling first thing in the morning before opening the apps on your phone. Maybe it's making yourself unavailable at work for larger chunks of time than you are comfortable doing. Whatever it is, just make sure it tends to the spirit. Quote, come on, don't let it slip away. For lukewarm love, zeal and well-doing makes grace green again. This is your sign. Make the most of the time you have left.